They laughed when Dorothy Mae Jenkins shuffled onto that stage in her discount store dress and worn-out shoes. But 30 seconds later, for celebrity judges were fighting back tears, and the entire audience was on their feet screaming her name. This is the story of a woman who spent 65 years believing she wasn't good enough, until one moment changed everything and proved that dreams don't have expiration dates. Dorothy Mae grew up in forgotten corners of rural Tennessee, where her daddy worked 3 jobs just to keep food on the table and her mama cleaned houses for the wealthy folks on the hill. In their tiny shotgun house with peeling paint and a leaky roof, there were 5 children crammed into 2 bedrooms, and dreams were considered as useless as fancy china. But Dorothy Mae had something special brewing inside her chest. At age 7, she discovered her voice while singing along to her grandmother's old gospel records. The sound that came from her small body was nothing short of miraculous, rich, powerful, and filled with a soul that seemed decades older than her years. Her voice could make the neighbors stop their yard work just to listen through the thin walls. When Dorothy Mae was 8, her 3rd grade teacher, Miss Rebecca Wilson, heard her humming during art class. The melody was so hauntingly beautiful that Miss Wilson stopped mid-sentence and asked Dorothy Mae to sing it again. The entire classroom fell silent as Dorothy Mae's voice filled the room like warm honey, sweet and golden and impossible to ignore. Miss Wilson pulled Dorothy Mae aside after class. "Sweetheart, has anyone ever told you that you have a gift?" Dorothy Mae shook her head, confused. "A gift?" "Your voice, honey. It's special, really special." That weekend, Miss Wilson visited the Jenkins family. She sat across from Dorothy Mae's parents at their rickety kitchen table, tried to convince them to let their daughter join the school choir, maybe even take some vocal lessons in town. Dorothy Mae's father, Earl Jenkins, was a man carved from disappointment and hard labor. His hands were permanently stained black from the tire factory, and his dreams had died somewhere between his 3rd kid and his 4th job. He looked at Miss Wilson like she was speaking a foreign language. "Ma'am, we appreciate what you're saying, but singing don't put food on the table. Dorothy Mae needs to focus on things that matter: reading, writing, arithmetic, real skills." Her mother, Clara, nodded silently, her eyes apologetic, but her mouth firmly shut. In the Jenkins household, Earl's word was law. Miss Wilson tried once more. "Mr. Jenkins, I've been teaching for 23 years, and I've never heard a voice like your daughter's. Not ever. She could have a real future in music." Earl's face hardened. "Future in music? Lady, look around. We live paycheck to paycheck. My daughter don't need her head filled with fancy dreams that'll only break her heart. She needs to learn to work hard and be practical." That night, Dorothy Mae pressed her ear to her bedroom door and heard her parents fighting. Her mother's voice was barely a whisper. "Earl, you should have heard her sing at the school program." Even the principal had tears in her eyes. "I don't care," the president himself cried. "Clara, we can't afford to encourage something we can't support. It's cruel to let a child believe in impossible things." From that moment on, music became Dorothy Mae's secret burden. She learned to keep her voice locked inside, humming only when she was alone in the fields behind their house, where the wind could carry her melodies away before anyone could hear them and disapprove. But here's what nobody knew. Dorothy Mae never stopped singing. Late at night, when the house was quiet and her siblings were asleep, she would sing into her pillow. She sang to the stars through her bedroom window. She sang to the stray cats that gathered in their backyard. She sang because not singing felt like slowly dying inside. At 16, Dorothy Mae was working 20 hours a week at Murphy's Diner while maintaining straight A's in school. Her guidance counselor, Mrs. Patricia Coleman, called her into the office one spring afternoon. "Dorothy Mae, you're one of our brightest students. Have you thought about college?" For just a moment, Dorothy Mae allowed herself to dream. College meant music programs. College meant choirs and voice lessons and maybe, just maybe, a chance to let her voice free. But reality crashed down like a physical blow. "My family needs my income, Mrs. Coleman. College isn't really an option for people like us." Mrs. Coleman leaned forward. "What if I told you there were scholarships? What if I told you that Tennessee State has a music program that could change your life?" Dorothy Mae's heart hammered against her ribs. She wanted to say yes, so badly it physically hurt. But she could see her father's disappointed face, could hear his voice. "Dreams don't pay bills, Dorothy Mae. I appreciate it, Mrs. Coleman, but music isn't practical. I need to think about my family." The guidance counselor watched this bright, talented girl sacrifice her dreams before they'd even had a chance to bloom, and it broke her heart. But Dorothy Mae had already made her choice. At 18, Dorothy Mae married Tommy Patterson, a decent man who worked at the lumber mill and promised her a stable life. By 20, she had her first baby. By 25, she had 3 children under the age of 5, and her voice had become just another thing she'd given up for her family. Tommy was a good husband in all the practical ways. He worked hard, didn't drink much, and never raised his hand to her or the kids. But he didn't understand a music that lived inside his wife's chest. When Dorothy Mae would hum while cooking dinner, he'd say, "Save your energy for things that matter, honey." The years blended together in a haze of diapers and school lunches and scraped knees and homework help. Dorothy Mae threw herself into being the best mother and wife she could be. She volunteered at the school, organized church bake sales, and kept the house so clean you could eat off the floors. But late at night, when everyone was sleeping, Dorothy Mae would step onto their back porch and sing softly to the darkness. Her voice, now mature and seasoned with life's joys and sorrows, had grown even more beautiful. It carried the weight of sacrifice, the depth of love, and the quiet strength of a woman who had given everything to others. When Dorothy Mae was 35, her youngest daughter Sarah came home from school excited about the annual talent show. "Mama, Mrs. Rodriguez says parents can participate too. You should sing something." Dorothy Mae's heart jumped, but she forced a smile and shook her head. "Oh, sweetie, talent shows are for you kids. Mama's too old for such things." But Sarah persisted. "Mrs. Rodriguez heard you singing in the car when you picked me up yesterday. She said you have a beautiful voice." That night, Dorothy Mae stood in front of her bathroom mirror, looking at her reflection. At 35, she still had music in her eyes, but was buried under layers of responsibility and self-doubt. She opened her mouth and began to sing Ave Maria, the song that always made her feel closest to something divine. The sound that emerged was breathtaking. 47 years of living, of loving, of sacrificing had added dimensions to her voice that weren't there in childhood. It was richer now, more complex, filled with story. Tommy appeared in the doorway. Dorothy Mae? That was really something. For a moment, her heart soared. Maybe Tommy finally understood. Maybe it wasn't too late. But then he smiled that practical smile she knew so well. "You sure can carry a tune. Maybe you should sing more at church." The moment deflated like a punctured balloon. Church singing was safe singing. Church singing wasn't dreams. It was just another way to serve others. The years continued their relentless march. Dorothy Mae's children grew up and moved away. Tommy developed heart problems at 58 and passed away quietly in his sleep when Dorothy Mae was 59. She found herself alone in their empty house, surrounded by photo albums and memories, and the echoing silence of a voice that had never truly been heard. At 60, Dorothy Mae started working part-time at the local library. She loved being surrounded by books and stories, loved helping the children with their reading. But every day, she walked past the music section and felt a familiar ache in her chest. One afternoon, a young girl about 8 years old was having trouble with her homework. Dorothy Mae sat down to help her, and the girl mentioned she was preparing for a singing audition. "I'm so nervous," the little girl confided. "What if I'm not good enough?" Dorothy Mae looked into those young eyes and saw herself at 8 years old, full of music and hope. "Sweetheart, let me tell you something. If you have music in your heart, you're already good enough. Don't let anyone tell you different." The girl smiled and hugged Dorothy Mae. "You have such a nice voice. Do you sing?" The question hit Dorothy Mae like a physical blow. Do you sing? Such a simple question. Such a complicated answer. "I used to," she whispered. That night, Dorothy Mae couldn't sleep. She walked out to her back porch and looked up at the stars, the same stars she'd been singing to for 57 years. And for the first time in decades, she let her voice ring out fully, holding nothing back. The song that emerged was Amazing Grace, the same song she'd sung in church at 9 years old. But this version was infused with a lifetime of joy and pain, love and loss, dreams deferred and hope that refused to die. Her neighbor, Mrs. Chun, working in her garden next door, stopped and listened with tears streaming down her face. The next morning, Mrs. Chen knocked on Dorothy Mae's door. "I heard you singing last night." "Dorothy Mae, I had no idea. Your voice is absolutely incredible." Dorothy Mae blushed and tried to deflect. "Oh, I was just making noise. Sorry if I disturbed you." "Disturbed me? Honey, you gave me chills. You should be performing somewhere. That voice is too beautiful to keep hidden." For weeks, Mrs. Chen's words echoed in Dorothy Mae's mind. At 65, was it too late? Had she missed her chance forever? Then one evening, Dorothy Mae's granddaughter Katie called with excitement bubbling in her voice. "Grandma, did you see that singing show is having auditions in Nashville next month? You should totally try out." Dorothy Mae laughed, but it sounded hollow even to her own ears. "Oh, Katie, honey, I'm way too old for something like that." "Grandma, remember what you always told me? That it's never too late to try something new." Dorothy Mae did remember saying that. She'd been trying to encourage Katie to take piano lessons. "Besides," Katie continued, "I looked it up online. There's no age limit. And Grandma, I still remember how you used to sing me to sleep when I was little. Your voice is magic." That night, Dorothy Mae sat in her living room with her laptop, watching audition videos from the show. She saw young singers, old singers, professional singers, and amateur singers. But what struck her wasn't their age or experience. It was their courage, their willingness to stand up and let their voices be heard, regardless of the outcome. At 2 a.m., Dorothy Mae found herself on the show's website, staring at the audition application. Her cursor hovered over the Submit button for 20 minutes. What was she thinking? She was 65 years old, a retired librarian from small-town Tennessee. She had no professional experience, no training, no business standing on that stage. But then she remembered that 8-year-old girl at the library, asking if she was good enough. She remembered her own 8-year-old self, humming in that tiny house, dreaming of something bigger. Dorothy Mae took a deep breath and clicked Submit. The confirmation email arrived immediately. "Thank you for your audition application. You have been selected for a preliminary audition in Nashville on March 15th. Dorothy Mae stared at the screen, her heart pounding so hard she thought she might faint. What had she done? The weeks leading up to the audition were a blur of panic and preparation. Dorothy Mae had never performed for anyone outside her family in church. She had no stage experience, no professional wardrobe, no idea what song to sing. She called Katie, who screamed with excitement, and immediately started helping her grandmother prepare. They chose Hallelujah by Leonard Cohen, a song that would let Dorothy Mae showcase her range while telling a story that resonated with her life experience. Dorothy Mae practiced every day, sometimes in her living room, sometimes in her car, sometimes in the empty church sanctuary when Pastor Williams let her use the space. Slowly, her confidence began to build. Her voice, dormant for so many years of quiet singing, began to remember its power. The night before the audition, Dorothy Mae couldn't eat dinner. She stood in front of her bedroom mirror, wearing the simple black dress she'd bought at JCPenney, and wondered if she was making the biggest mistake of her life. Her phone rang. It was Katie. "Grandma, how are you feeling?" "Terrified," Dorothy Mae admitted. "What if I embarrass myself? What if I forget the words? What if they laugh at me?" "Grandma," Katie's voice was firm but gentle. "What if you don't go? What if you spend the rest of your life wondering what might have happened? You've been carrying this music inside you for 65 years. Don't you think it's time to let it out?" Dorothy Mae closed her eyes and nodded, even though Katie couldn't see her. "You're right, sweetheart. You're absolutely right." The morning of the audition, Dorothy Mae woke up before sunrise. She drove the 2 hours to Nashville in her 15-year-old Honda Civic, singing scales and practicing her breathing exercises. The audition venue was a massive convention center filled with hundreds of hopeful singers, most of them young enough to be her children or grandchildren. Dorothy Mae found a quiet corner and called Katie one more time. "I'm here," she whispered. "There are so many people, Katie. So many young, talented people. I feel foolish." Grandma, listen to me. Age is just a number. Talent is talent. And you, Grandma Dorothy Mae Jenkins, have more talent in your little finger than most people have in their whole bodies. Now go in there and show them what 65 years of living sounds like. Dorothy Mae's number was called at 3:47 p.m. Her hands were shaking as she walked down the long hallway toward the audition room. Behind those doors were 4 celebrity judges who had heard thousands of voices, who knew talent when they heard it, who could change her life with a simple yes or no. She paused outside the door, closed her eyes, and whispered a prayer, not for success, not for fame, but for courage. Courage to finally, after 65 years, let her true voice be heard. Dorothy Mae opened the door and stepped into the room. The judges looked up from their notes. Simon Morrison, the sharp-tongued British producer, Amanda Kelly, the pop star turned judge, Marcus Washington, the R&B legend, and Jennifer Stone, the country music icon. They saw a 65-year-old woman in a simple black dress and comfortable shoes, clutching a microphone like it might save her life. Simon Morrison glanced at his watch and barely suppressed an eye roll. Name and age. Amanda Kelly asked with professional politeness. Dorothy Mae Jenkins. I'm 65 years old. The judges exchanged quick glances. In their world, 65 was ancient for a singing competition. And what will you be singing for us today? Marcus Washington asked. Hallelujah by Leonard Cohen. All right then, Simon Morrison said, leaning back in his chair. Whenever you're ready. Dorothy Mae closed her eyes for just a moment, and in that darkness, she saw her whole life flash by. She saw herself at 8 years old, humming in her childhood bedroom. She saw herself at 18, giving up her dreams for marriage. She saw herself at 35, singing to her bathroom mirror. She saw herself at 60, working at the library, helping that little girl with her homework. And she realized that every moment, every sacrifice, every year of keeping her voice locked away had been leading to this. This was her moment. This was her time. Dorothy Mae opened her eyes, lifted the microphone to her lips, and began to sing. The first note that emerged from her throat was pure magic, rich, powerful, and filled with 65 years of stored emotion. The judges sat up straighter immediately. Simon Morrison's eyebrows shot up in surprise. Amanda Kelly leaned forward, her mouth slightly open. As Dorothy Mae moved into the second verse, something extraordinary happened. Her voice seemed to fill not just a room, but the entire building. Every person in that audition space stopped what they were doing and listened. Production assistants paused in the hallways. Security guards took off their headphones. Other contestants, waiting their turn, fell silent. By the time Dorothy Mae reached the climactic note in the bridge, a soaring, heartbreaking hallelujah that seemed to come from her very soul, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Marcus Washington was openly weeping. Jennifer Stone had her hand over her heart. Even Simon Morrison, famous for his harsh critiques, was staring at Dorothy Mae like he'd witnessed a miracle. When the last note faded into silence, the room remained perfectly quiet for what felt like an eternity. Dorothy Mae stood there, her chest rising and falling, wondering if she'd just made a fool of herself. Then Marcus Washington stood up. Then Jennifer Stone. Then Amanda Kelly. Finally, even Simon Morrison rose from his chair. They were giving her a standing ovation. Dorothy Mae, Amanda Kelly said, her voice thick with emotion, "In 15 years of judging on this show, I have never, and I mean never, heard anything like what you just did." Simon Morrison nodded, his usual sarcasm completely absent. That wasn't just singing. That was storytelling. That was a lifetime of experience pouring out through your voice. Jennifer Stone wiped tears from her eyes. "Honey, where have you been hiding?" That voice should have been heard by the world decades ago. But it was Marcus Washington who said what everyone in the room was thinking. He stood up, walked around the judge's table, and approached Dorothy Mae. Without saying a word, he placed his hand on the golden buzzer. The room exploded with golden confetti and music. Dorothy Mae stood there in shock as the 4 judges surrounded her, hugging her, congratulating her, telling her that her life was about to change forever. Later, when the cameras were rolling for the show's broadcast, Dorothy Mae's audition became the most watched audition video in the show's history. Comments poured in from around the world. I'm 73, and she's inspired me to join my local choir. This proves it's never too late to follow your dreams. I've watched this 15 times, and I cry every single time. This is what pure talent looks like. Dorothy Mae's story spread far beyond the singing competition. She was invited to appear on morning talk shows, to sing the national anthem at sporting events, to perform at charity galas. A major record label offered her a recording contract. But more importantly, Dorothy Mae's courage inspired thousands of people to pursue dreams they'd given up on. Letters poured in from around the world, from a 45-year-old accountant who started taking art classes, from a 60-year-old teacher who began writing the novel she'd always dreamed of, from an 80-year-old man who learned to play piano for the first time. Dorothy Mae never won the singing competition. She made it to the finals, but lost to a 22-year-old with a powerful voice and youth on his side. But winning wasn't the point anymore. The point was that after 65 years of silence, Dorothy Mae Jenkins had finally found her voice. On the night of the finale, as Dorothy Mae stood on stage in a beautiful gown, surrounded by lights and music and applause, she thought about that 8-year-old girl who used to sing to the stars. She thought about all the years she kept her music locked away, all the dreams she'd sacrificed for others. And she realized that sometimes the greatest victories aren't about winning or losing. Sometimes they're about having the courage to try. Sometimes they're about proving to yourself and the world that it's never too late to become who you were always meant to be. Dorothy Mae Jenkins was 65 when she finally followed her dream. Her voice didn't just deserve the golden buzzer. It deserved to be heard by the world. And more than that, she deserved to let it ring out full and free and unashamed after a lifetime of keeping it hidden. Because dreams don't have expiration dates. Talent doesn't diminish with age. And sometimes the most beautiful music comes from voices that have lived long enough to have something real to say. If Dorothy Mae Jenkins could find the courage at 65 to step on that stage and bare her soul through song, what dreams are you keeping locked away? What voice inside you is waiting to be heard? The stage is always there, waiting. The only question is, will you have the courage to step into the light?